Hey folks, welcome back. So in the last video, we have discussed about SQLAlchemy and we used SQLAlchemy to make database queries and we implemented an API with that. So in this video, we will do more SQLAlchemy database queries and implement the APIs. So let's get started. So we will be implementing these APIs. So if you see, we already implemented create a new category API. And so we will be implementing list all categories API, which is a GET request, and it retrieves the information from the category table and returns the JSON response. And the other endpoint is retrieve category by ID. So if we give a specific ID of the category, it will return the response back. And we can also update the category name and description. And we also implement API for deleting the category by ID. So let's get started with list all categories. Let's query the category table to see the existing data. Let's write SQL query select star from category. So when we execute it, we can see the existing categories: appliances, apps, and games, art, scraps, and so on. So let's write SQLAlchemy query for this and implement the API. Let's go back to VS Code and let's click on. So currently we are using the previous code from the previous video. So just go to routers and click on category. So this is the endpoint that we already added. So let's add one more endpoint to retrieve all categories. Let me do that. Router dot get. Let me copy this. So the endpoint is categories and the status code should be 200 and same response model. So let's define the function list categories and no parameters are required. Let's yeah, for now just return empty array and save it. Let me refresh this page so we can see that the endpoint is added. Let's go back to the code and write the SQLAlchemy DB query for retrieving all categories. So let me go back to queries. Let's write a select query to retrieve all category records. So let me use decorator session and fetch categories session because we are using the session decorator and we don't need any other extra arguments or parameters. So let's write statement select category and filter. Just don't pass anything, so that will do a select star query. So let's bring that to C statement. So now let's execute it using session dot execute statement and return result dot scalars dot all. Let me save this and import this in routers. Let me go back in here. Dot queries dot category import which categories. So let's use that here. Categories equals to fetch categories or just return this. So now, so let me save this and see our development server is already restarted. Let's go back to docs. Let me refresh this and try it out. So we got 500. Let's go back to code again to see what exactly the error is. So here we can see that it's saying the identity is saying name, description, and ID is missing. So let's see why it is missing. So here the response model is category response model, but here we are returning the list of categories. So we will need to, we need to convert these to list. So now it should work. Let's see, development server is restarted again. Let's go back to docs and refresh it. So here we can see the expected response. So that's how we can implement it. Let's see the query again. So if we go to queries, so here we are just doing the select query, and we already added the print statement here, so it should show up in the console or terminal. So here we can see that the actual query that is being executed. Select category ID, category name, category description, category timestamp, and from a category table. So let's copy the same SQL and go to pgadmin and execute it there. Let's run it. So here we can see the same three records. Let's go back to code again. And so we implemented listing all categories, and we got the expected response. So now we need to implement the other API, which is retrieve category by ID. So let me go back to routers and add that endpoint here. Router.get, the endpoint is categories npk. Let me copy this and come back in here, paste that, and status code 200, and response class is category response model, and get category. We need to get a primary key for the category, and, which is integer, and we don't need anything else. So let's write, yeah. So before this, we need to check whether the given primary key exists in the database or not. If it is not exist, and then we need to return a 404 response. So let's use services for this. Let's go to services and add get category. Okay, we already have this fetch category by ID, but we need to check if the category is not exist, and then we need to throw the error 404 error. So let's go to the query that we have in here, fetch category by ID. So here we are selecting category where ID equals to given primary key, and this will return either category or none. So we need to add a statement here to check the category exists or not. So object equals to fetch category by ID. If object is none, then we need to raise exception. So let's not use the existing exception based class. Let's create errors as exceptions and use that. Let me create errors and base.py. Let's create found error, and which inherits exception. Let's save that. Let's import it in services. Import not found error. So if object is none, then we need to raise not found error by saying category with ID equals to pk does not exist. So otherwise, just return the object. Let's save this and go back to routers, and let's use that here. Which categories? This is not needed. Get category. So here we have the same name for get category, so that's why I'm changing the get category to get category by ID. So let's change that and use this get category here. So as we are throwing exception there, so it will return 500 response here, but we need to return 404 response if the category is not found. So then we need to use try block for this. Return get category. Okay. So let me update that. Get category, and we need to pass primary key for that, and then try except not found error. So we need to, as we are using relative imports, let's continue to use that. Not found error, we imported that. So if it is the exception, and then we need to raise HTTP exception for this, and then status code should be 404, and detail is string. Let's convert the exception to string and return that. So let's save this. So now we are calling the category, and if does not exist, it will throw the not found error, and if it throws the error, and then we are returning the HTTP exception, which will result in returning 404 status code and detail message. So let's go back to docs and test it out. So let me refresh it. Okay, same some error. Let me go back to code again. And what happened? Type object category response model has no attribute media type. Okay. Yeah, that's the issue. So here we need to mention response model, not the class. Let's save that, and here we can see that it's running fine, but we can see some error in here. Okay, this is not needed actually. So here we can see that there are no errors. Fine, our server is restarted. Let's go back to docs and refresh it. Yeah, here we can see that category by get category by ID. So let's try to pass invalid ID. Let's say 1234 1234 and something, and then click on this. So here we can see that it's returning the status code 404, and the detailed message is category with ID doesn't exist. So that's expected. And let's try to use the existing ID. Let's use 2. So here we can see that the response. So we are using the existing query for this. Let's go and see the SQLAlchemy query. Let's go back to code and hide that and open this. So here we can see fetch category by ID. We are just doing select category where, and checking the where category ID equals to a given ID. Let's print the statement and check it. So server restarted. Let me go back to docs again and execute it. Still we get the same thing because we just added the print statement. Let's go back to code again and see the query. So here we can see that the query. So select all columns from category table and where category ID equals to the given ID. So that's how it's working. That is fine. And now let's implement the other API endpoint. Let's go in here, and now we completed this, and we need to implement put endpoint, which takes a primary key as argument, and we need to send the payload for this name and the description. And if it successfully updates the category, then it should return the response back. So before updating the data, it needs to check if the category already exists, and if it already exists, and then it needs to return the response by saying the category already exists. Otherwise it need to update the category. So if the category doesn't exist, and then it need to return the 404 response. So let's implement that. Let's go to routers and add router dot the put endpoint, and let me copy this and add here, and expected status code is 200, and response model is category response model. Let's define the function data category by ID. Okay, it expects pk, which is integer, and the user also needs to send the payload, so we need to have a payload for that. So let's use the model, and let's use the existing model, category model, because it expects name and description. So if we go to this model and see, so we have those two attributes. Let's close the schema and come back in here. So now we need to check two things. One, whether the given ID exists in the database or not. If it doesn't exist, and then we need to return 404 error. So let's create try except. So if it founds not found error, and then we need to raise this. So otherwise, for any other exception, we just need to return 500. Raise HTTP exception status code 500 and detail string of E. Let's say if update is failed, okay, then so let's consider that as 500 for now. Let's save this, and we need to have the query to update that. So let's write the utility functionality in services.py file. Let's write the update utility function. So let's define that update category. So we need to update ID or primary key, which is integer, and the payload is in pydantic model, which is a category model. So both name and description are required fields in pydantic model if we go and see that. So let me come back to services. Now we need to check two things here. So pk exists or not in the database, and from the model we get the name. So if the name already exists, so we need to check these two things. So if any one of these conditions failed, and then we need to raise required exception for that. So let's do that. So for this first condition, we already have the code for that. So let's reuse that. We just need to pass pk for this. So this will search the category by ID, and then if it is not found, and then this will throw the not found error. That is what we wanted. Now we need to have check for this name already exists. So now we need to find it with name. So let me copy this. So if the model is already there, object equals to fetch category by name, and if object is not none and object dot id is not equals to the pk which we sent, then in this case we need to throw the error, which is by saying already category already exists with the name. So for that we need to create a new error. So let's go to errors base and create that error as already exists error and exception. Let's save this and import it in services. And raise object is not none and object.id is not equal to pk. Then raise already exists error. Okay, we imported that. Now raise the error by saying category with name already exists. So if it not already exists, and then we need to update that. Update. So now we didn't have any SQLAlchemy query for this, so we need to write that. Let's go to queries and add that. Let's write query for that. Let's define update category by ID. Let's first parameter is session, because we are using the session decorator, which will pass the session as first parameter. Now we need to have a primary key for that, so which is of type int, and we need to have model for this because it's a pydantic model that user will send payload. So this is a category model. Okay, we need to update. Let's write the statement for that. Update category where category dot id equals to pk and values are star model dot dict. So we need to execute this statement. Let's result equals to session dot execute statement. Now if let's see if it is updated or not. So if it is updated, and then the number of affected the number of rows which are affected is greater than 1. So result dot row count, which is row count is SQLAlchemy function or the attribute on the result. So if it is greater than 0, then we can say that it is updated. So if is updated, then we need to commit the transaction. So session dot commit, just return the is updated. Let's save that, copy this and go to services and import it. Now come back here and call update category by ID, and we need to pass pk and model, so it will return it. So let's say if we didn't update is updated, is not is updated, if we didn't update it, and then we need to raise the exception by saying update failed error. So we need to add that error as well. Let me go to errors and add that class update failed error, and which inherits exception, and save that and inherit that in services. You can go here and import that. Now we need to raise that exception, raise update failure, fail to update the category. So we don't need to return anything, or we just need to return pk. Let me go back. We can use this update category in routers now. So update category to be okay, need to import that from services. Let's go to the router that we are working on, and we are passing that and retrieving the record back. So currently we are returning these two exceptions, one is for 404 and 500, and let's save this and try it out. Let's check the development server, which is running fine. Let's go to browser, which means the docs, and test it out. Let's refresh, and we need to, let's check the existing categories. So we have 2, 3 and 1. Let's update the first record. Let's come here and try it out. Let's try for 404 first. Let's say 123 ID, which is not exist in the DB. Let's go back to so here we can see that, from here we can see that like we have only 1, 2, 3 IDs. All right, so let's try to send a request, and we can see that the category with ID 123 doesn't exist, which is expected. Let's try to pass the same thing. Now let's try to update ID with so the current thing is electronics and TV, telephone, something. So let me change that to games or something. Let's change that to games. Games are awesome. Let's execute it. So we can see that we updated the name and description both. So let's try the other thing. Like let's say we want to update existing name. Let's go to the response and see. Let's try to update the existing name to apps and names. Let's send name. Let's change the name to apps and names and try it out. So now we can see that it's throwing 500 error, but it's saying category with the name apps and games already exist. So for this case, we need to return 400 response because this is not at 500. So let's go to code and update that. We need to add one more exception here, except already exists error. Okay, so if it is already exists, and then we need to raise HTTP exception. Now let's go to docs and test it. So now we can see that we are returning 400 status code for this, so which is good. So we have implemented the required functionality for this endpoint. Let's go to code and see the other requirement that we have. So let's go back in here and let's see the preview. So we have implemented this, and now we need to implement delete API endpoint. So let's go to routers and implement it. Let me go back to routers. Let's add router dot delete, which is, and then now we need to use the same thing. So we don't need this response model because we will be sending no content for this. So category is pk, which will be deleted. So now we just define this delete category by id. So which expects pk and which is integer. Now we need to implement the functionality for this. Let's return nothing for now. We need to call delete function in services. Let's add that utility function in there. Let's go here, add delete category, which expects pk, which is integer, and then now we need to check if the pk doesn't exist, and then we need to throw 404 error. Let's use the existing functionality for this because we already have the functionality for throwing not found error. So that is taken care if it is found, and then we need to delete that. So we didn't have query for that, so we need to implement that in queries.py file. So let's go to queries and category. So we need to implement the delete. So let's do that. Let me add session. Let's define delete category by id, and then first argument is session because the decorator passes that. Now we need to have this integer, I mean the primary key. So now we need to write the delete statement. So let's do that. Delete. Okay, we didn't import that, so we need to import that from SQLAlchemy. Let's import that and delete category where category.id equals to pk. So now we have the statement for this. Let's print that statement and let's execute that. So once we execute it, we can confirm that we row count the number of affected rows. So if it is greater than 0, then that means it's deleted, otherwise it failed to delete. So if it is deleted, and then we need to comment that. Let's change this is updated to is deleted. Yeah, so now this is done. Let's copy this function name and come back to services and import this. Let's use that in here. Is deleted. We need to pass pk for this. So if not is deleted, then we need to throw an exception. Raise delete failed error. So we haven't defined it, so let's go back to error space, which is this, and add that exception, and let's save that and come back to services and save this. I think we need to import that here. So now we have imported it. We can say fail to delete category with id equals to pk. Otherwise just return pk. Let's implement this in routers. So now as we are raising exceptions, we need to handle that. Let's use try and pk equals to Actually, it doesn't need pk for now. Delete category. Then we need to pass pk for this. It throws, yeah, we need to return response. Okay, we need to import that from FastAPI. So because for delete, we need to return empty body. So that's why we need response. Return this, and status code equals to 204, which is fine, except not found error as e, it is not found, and then we need to throw this. Otherwise we need to throw this exception, which is 500. Okay, it seems we didn't import it. Let's go back here and import it. So now we didn't see any errors. Let's see. Yeah, our development server is also restarted. Let me go back to docs and refresh it. Now we can see the delete endpoint here. So let's try to delete the ID which is not existing in the DB. Let's try for 11, 22, 33, and let's try that, and we can see 404 error, which is expected. And we can also see that from this endpoint we have ID 1, 2, 3, and let's delete ID 1. So let's add 1 here and delete that. Now we can see that we got 204 response, and let's go back to the database and see if we have the ID 1 or not in the database. Let me go back to pgadmin and make the query for this. So we can see that we have only 2 records. We can also confirm this from our API docs, which is this. Let's come here and execute and see the response. Currently we have only 2 records. So this is how we can implement the all CRUD operations by using SQLAlchemy queries. Let's see the queries in a quick bit. Let me go to queries. So here we have insert, select, update, and delete utility functions from SQLAlchemy. So here we are using insert statement to insert the data. So when we use print statement, it will print it. Let's yeah, I forgot to show you the print statements in here as well. So let me open the shell, and here we can see that the delete statement. So it's executing these delete from category where category ID equals to ID, and this is select statement, and we can see all raw SQL which is being executed. So this is very easy way to debug the SQL that we write in ORM. So that is for that, and these are the simple SQLAlchemy queries that we use to delete and update and retrieve. So we can see all other complex queries. We can make all other complex queries by using SQLAlchemy, but we need to read the SQLAlchemy documentation. So that's it for this video. If you find it useful, please share, like, and subscribe. Thank you.